Yeah. All right, we are now live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Superlative Podcast. I'm Edward Bushi. One guest, no edits, no post production, just a sharp live conversation about what it really takes to reach higher levels and what comes next. So let's get into it. I want to introduce Peter from First Course Capital. Peter Herz. He reversed his own chronic illness with food and no medication, then built a fund on a bet that most of what we're told about fixing the food system is wrong. Before we get into your story, just want to say a big welcome to you, Peter, and thank you for coming to the show. Before we start, I would love to know what two sentences about First Course Capital, and then we'll get back to that at the end.
That'd be great. Thanks very much for having me. I love talking about my work. So First Course Capital is an early stage venture capital firm that is focused on fixing the U.S. food system. The U.S. food system is killing people and killing the planet, but aside from that, it's great. It's very profitable, and it is making people really sick, which makes healthcare extraordinarily profitable. So those are the big challenges that we're trying to address.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned profitable, right? Because if I were to talk to Robert Kennedy Jr. or talk about anybody from the Maha movement, it's not really profitable long term if people get sick and can't buy things anymore. But yeah,
That that is true. It depends, who it's profitable for. So there's a small subset of people who are making bank while most people are not. So
yeah,
that's the current system.
totally. And yeah, we'll love to get into your story and how you're breaking that. So, want to start off, right? Your journey into this is not typical. You weren't necessarily of a farming background. You're more like an engineer. Would you like to start with your backstory?
Yeah. My origin story, I guess, is different. I'm an electrical engineer with a
Mm,
specialty in computer architecture. So I was a serial entrepreneur for most of my career in deep tech, in semiconductors, chip design, data storage, and some enterprise software. So it really wasn't until I was in a doctor's appointment around 2010. I was diagnosed as obese and suffering from sleep apnea, pre-diabetic blood sugar levels, elevated cholesterol, and gout.
mm,
And the most remarkable thing about that visit with the doctor was how completely unremarkable it was for him. He just said, this is what happens. You're getting older. Don't
mm.
worry. We have interventions. We
Yeah.
have surgeries and drugs. And he did cop to the fact that each of these interventions would cause side effects. But not to worry, there were more surgeries and still more drugs to address the side effects.
Oh man, Band-Aid
So,
for the Band-Aid that would break.
yes, exactly. And, I'm as a serial entrepreneur, game recognizes game.
Mm.
And I saw this, and it was basically how to monetize my health. The word cure never passed his lips. It was always, we're going to do these interventions that we're going to manage chronic conditions indefinitely.
Hmm.
And I can't prove this, but I swear there was some fresh faced MBA that showed up in healthcare about 30, 40 years ago, hit them across the head with a 2x4 and said, never cure a patient again. If you cure a
Whoa.
patient, you fire them as a customer.
That's against doctrine. Oh my goodness.
Yes, that's
Oh
not
man.
profitable. You want to
Yeah.
keep your customers forever.
Mm.
And I think healthcare took that to heart. And I will say that there are some more enlightened doctors in the world, in the US. But what I received was, I think, the standard of care. It's
Mm.
what most people hear. And unfortunately, doctors are not trained in nutrition.
Mm.
They barely get
No, no,
any
they're not.
education at all. And so it's all about, we're going to run a bunch of tests, blood tests, and some other tests, and that'll tell us what drugs we should prescribe. And then you're just on the economic wagon of the U.S. medical system.
Yeah, you're the
So
perfect customer for that system.
exactly.
Yeah. Oh man.
Exactly. So
So
I went home and I looked up these 5 things I was diagnosed with, and they were all metabolic diseases caused by my diet. So I did give my doctor one more chance. I went in and I said, "Hey, it looks like there's a root cause to my issues. Maybe I should work on my diet." And
hmm,
he just rejected it out of hand. He said, "Forget about it. No one ever does.
hmm,
Let's schedule your surgery and tell me which pharmacy to send the prescriptions to." So that was the beginning of my journey.
hmm. So, what? But I, from our onboarding calls, right? One thing I found really particular is your ability to be, because you're a startup founder from a serial entrepreneur, and you don't you didn't just get into this business um, uh, by chance. You part of this element that really struck me was your contrarianism, right? And I would love to like dive into that before we get into the what you're doing at First Course, because I feel it really informs how you do your work, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like first off, I have friends who say they're contrarian, right? Does contrarian just mean just say the opposite of whatever someone's saying? Like, what? How do we first think of that thought?
You know, I do have a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction that whenever I hear something, I want to figure out the edges of it
Mm-hmm.
and where it might not be true. So I do have a little bit of contrarian for contrarian's sake, but I really couple that with I like to do my own homework. I like to
Yep.
figure out things for myself. And it's a hard thing to do, particularly in food. The marketplace of ideas is very noisy in food.
Hmm.
And, a lot of terrible ideas get a lot of traction in the information marketplace today. But even before I got into food, um, the thing that I really love to find
Yep.
is whenever some piece of received wisdom that everybody thinks is true turns out
Yeah.
not to be true.
Yeah. That's a saying, also, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so that stuff always got my attention. A good example of this is in economics, and I'm an amateur student of economics.
Hmm.
It turns out that the basis of conventional economics is built on rational actor theory and efficient markets. And rational actor theory says that everyone operates always in their own rational self-interest,
Mm-hmm.
and efficient markets say that the price of things in markets is always the quote unquote correct price. All the information is already in the price. There's no long-term opportunity to take advantage in the stock market or in other places.
Yeah. It's
And
short-sighted, the framework. It sounds like.
yes, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's I have a theory about this. I think
Hmm.
that rational actor theory was and efficient markets were really built by a group of old white men
Hmm.
who probably sat around in a room and decided, oh, we don't understand our spouses. We have no idea what's going on. Emotions are really kind of messy and hard to understand. Why don't we build our economic theory on the foundation that emotions don't exist?
That's
It,
so
it
much cleaner.
yes, it makes the math so much better, so much
Oh my
easier to
gosh.
do. But it doesn't bear any relevance to reality.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but that's really what our system is built on.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gotten really intrigued by behavioral economics, which has taken decades to really get some traction.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but really, the difference between the conventional economics and behavioral economics is, hey, maybe emotions actually do matter. And so I think there's a real opportunity there to
Hmm.
understand how the world really works as compared to, how, people who are trying to do analysis on it assume it works. Another example, I'm not a particular fan of baseball as a
Yeah.
sport, but There was this whole, actually, it was a book written by Michael Lewis
Michael Lewis,
that
yes.
talked about Bill James, who was the creator of sabermetrics. And, rational actor theory and efficient markets would have said that a game like baseball, a sport like baseball, that has been around for over 100 years, has
Mm-hmm.
billions of dollars riding on the outcomes, you would assume, if rational actor theory and efficient markets were correct, that there wasn't anything new to think about in baseball,
Mm.
and that the whole professional sport would have been as efficient as any marketplace. And it really took Bill James developing sabermetrics to start from the ground up and try to figure out what matters in baseball.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of statistics in baseball that don't matter. One of them is RBIs. It turns out
Oh,
that
what is the
RBIs,
RBIs?
so RBIs are runs batted in, and it's something that is measured, I believe, since the beginning of the sport. The idea, when you're a batter, you get up to bat. Every time you have a hit and you bring some people home, might be, if you hit a home run, you get home, but if someone's on base and they get home based on your hit, then you get a run batted in credit for that.
Run better in.
But it turns out that
It was the wrong metric.
it's the wrong metric, because what matters most in the RBI stat is how many people happen to be on base when you come to bat. And you have no control of that as a batter. It's completely random. And so that statistic doesn't tell you anything about whether it's a good batter or not. And the other major stat that he figured out, which historically wasn't well understood, is how valuable walking is. So getting on base, any way you get on base, even if it's a walk, is worth a lot, because getting on base is the whole point of a batter. If he's successful, they'll get on base. And unfortunately, through most of baseball's history, walking was viewed as a cop-out, as a weak thing. And so we were not we're counting RBIs that don't matter, and we were treating walking as kind of a lower class path, when it turns out that's the most valuable. If you have the eye to differentiate between a strike that's pitched versus a ball, and you can get on base through walking more, that's maybe the most valuable attribute for a batter. So I love this stuff that, you find these people. There are not a lot of them in the world. They're kind of it's almost by definition, it's a minority group of people that are willing to challenge assumptions. And for me, I really love that.
Can I ask you though, because you're a contrarian, right? When
Yes.
you looked at the on base metric, and then it
Yes.
was beaten by it really trumps the RBI one. How did you
Yes.
know that connected with you? Because we're hitting two things, right? Which
Yep.
really are getting me right now. Emotions do matter, right? Rational
Yep.
actor theory is inefficient in itself, and then
Yep.
looking at the wrong thing, right? Which
Yes.
we're catching some really interesting stuff here.
Yeah. Again, for me, it's really finding these things that are contrary to what most people think is the case. And, it turns out there's just a lot of bad ideas that have traction in the world. And, for me, I like finding those and understanding them. I am on a lifelong learning journey. I go through a book a week. So I'm reading very widely. I'm trying to learn as much as I can. And I think the things I find most interesting, everybody's different, but the thing I find most interesting are the people who crack open some pieces of truth that are just not believed by most people. So that's really where I like to play.
Yeah, and speaking of that, one of the things that you mentioned to me in our onboarding call is you're neighbors with a very famous person, at least in the financial world, right? You,
Oh, Michael Burry.
Michael Burry, yeah, there you go, right? And you were talking about he noticed something uh, that nobody was looking at, and it was of all places was in the legal documents. That's where you
Yes.
knew something was wrong, right?
Yes.
Peter, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah, I love it because it's another really strong example of how people can just have wrong ideas and they can be very popular for a
Hmm.
while. And the mortgage-backed security business was a really good example of that.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people making a lot of money, and if you were standing from the outside and trying to, analyze the situation,
Hmm.
um, this is something that took decades to unfold.
Yeah.
But if you go back, prior to the 1980s, if you wanted to buy a house, you would get a mortgage from a bank,
Yeah.
and historically, the bank would hold the mortgage for the whole term. If it was
Yeah.
a 30-year mortgage, that bank was the holder of that mortgage for all 30 years. And it was a really big change in the 80s when the regulations changed and the banks could sell those mortgages. And what happened was, if you're the one who has to make sure that the mortgage is a good loan and it's going to last for 30 years, you're going to make sure you do that underwriting really carefully.
Hmm.
As the bank, historically, that's what you did. But then, if you're just going to sell the mortgage, and in the
Rehypothecate
end,
it. Yeah.
you're just going to sell it on, and in the end of the mortgage-backed security catastrophe, the banks would typically hold the mortgage for less than a month. So they weren't even really concerned. I mean, I think they had to deliver the first mortgage payment. I think
Hmm.
that was frowned upon if you sold a mortgage where the first mortgage payment didn't show up. But beyond that, it was more, the banks didn't care anymore. They were
It
just
was a
selling
hot
it and
potato. Just
making
get
it
rid
on the
of it.
fees. Exactly. And what Michael Burry did, and this is really a testament to diversity,
Oh.
because Michael Burry ended up being one of the few people on earth who actually read a mortgage-backed securities offering document from beginning to end. Not even the lawyers who draft these agreements have read
Yeah.
it front to back, because the agreements were always divided up amongst different lawyers. So there will be one or a couple of lawyers who write a section, but not even they will have read the whole thing from beginning to end.
Yeah.
So Michael Burry was one of the few people on earth who actually read one, and having read it, he decided that this was a market that had to be shorted because it was that stupid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reason I say it's a testament to diversity, it turned out that he was on the autistic spectrum, and and it may be part of what gives him the particular patience and inclination to read one of these things that no one else on earth would have read.
Yeah.
And so he's the
It's a
one.
superpower. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a superpower, exactly. And so he figured it out, and a handful of other investors did, but most people didn't, and the banks were happy to cash the checks until the music ended.
Mm.
So it was a way for the banks to make a lot of money along the way. And I think they knew, and it was proven out, of course, that the government was happy to bail them out when it all went bad. But
Yep. Yep.
the individual homeowners were really shredded by this.
Yep.
But Michael Burry is one of those people who figured it out. And there's a great book and a film by the same name called The Big Short
Mm-hmm. The
that
Big Short fame.
describes
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
And it's anyone who hasn't seen The Big Short should absolutely see it, or go read the book. It's great.
I remember watching that movie several times, and this your story of finding the insight that the alarms were on from the legal documents. I don't remember that from the movie. I wish they really hit that home, because it feels like really jarring and
Yeah.
like information that you're sharing with me. There's just like, wow, we would have known so early if we actually read, you know?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it's. I think part of the signals that I've begun to see, and I've lived through five big economic events in my life, in my adult life,
You're like a millennial.
and yeah, no, I've seen a lot. I'm a huge fan. Anyone who wants to really understand the world better,
Hmm.
um, learning from history is so valuable because all these things have happened before.
Hmm.
Today we are living through an AI bubble,
Yeah.
and
Not happened before literally, but in a sense that there's a word that financial people use, like it rhymes, for example.
yes,
Yeah, yeah,
yes, yeah. History doesn't repeat; it
it
rhymes.
rhymes. Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I lived through the dot-com bubble, and people forget that even the best companies like Amazon and Cisco Systems both dropped more than 90%
Hmm.
during the dot-com bubble
Yeah.
bursting. Um, but you can go back. There are some books about the tulip mania in the Netherlands,
Yeah. Yeah.
where at one point a tulip bulb was priced at the same level of a house.
Yes,
And
and the genetically mutated ones too, right?
yeah,
Like the ones that
yep,
were just had infections. Those
yeah,
were priced so crazily, and nobody
yep,
knew.
right.
Yeah.
And the same thing happened, again in the dot-com bubble. Um, and the internet craze was it's not the case that the internet craze was wrong. It's just that people get all excited about one thing and then it gets bid into the stratosphere.
Hmm.
So after the dot-com bubble burst, the internet became really fundamental plumbing to the whole business world and really everybody's life.
Hmm.
But the market, collapsed. It took more than 10, maybe 15 years for the market to return to the level it was at the peak of the dot-com craze.
Yeah.
And AI is going to be the same thing. AI is going to end up
Is
being
this?
poured in every product and service on earth, but you just can't uh, have such high valuations and then watch them only get higher. I mean, eventually that stuff will come to earth at
Mm,
some point.
gotcha, gotcha. So there's something wrong with the industry. Like how are they going to demonstrate return on earnings with such high valuations? And the goalposts essentially just moves further with higher valuations.
Right, right. I mean, the SpaceX IPO is a good example of this, where it's being valued at more than 100x revenue,
Mm,
and eventually, yeah, sure, maybe it can grow into its valuation, but
yeah.
the revenue is going to have to grow a lot to get there, and and it's keeps going up. So that's going to be a hard thing to pencil.
Yeah. So so we're talking about like space, like, and there are people that could argue that going to Mars and habiting that or habiting the moon is important. There is something, right, that's close to home that we could and should focus on, and that's the food industry, right? And this is where I
Yes.
really want to like get into what you're working on, because we covered a lot about how folks were structuring how they saw the world in the economics in a very in a short-sighted way. People keep looking in the wrong areas, and not only that, people don't look at information that's already out there
Right.
to right. So like, where are the parallels in the food industry that you think are underserved or like are really big opportunities?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so this is another example, I think, where there's an opportunity for people to have contrarian insights. And again, it's a very noisy marketplace, so people can get confused very easily. And most people don't have time to dig into it the way I have, because it's my job. But what I find is um, one of the big insights I had as an engineer. I have been successful in the work of being a serial entrepreneur in the technical world, but it was a real aha moment for me to realize that you can't engineer complex systems. And if you're doing, smartphones or software or computers or buildings or planes, those are all things that are what I call complicated systems. And
Oh,
the
there's a
engineering
difference.
tools,
Complicated and complex.
yes, there is. And
Oh,
the
okay.
main difference between a complicated system and a complex one is that in a complex system, there are all kinds of feedback loops that operate between all the building blocks. Whereas in a complicated system, there isn't that level of interaction between all the building blocks. And so that's really the key distinction. And biological systems have incredibly complex feedback loops. You, for example, have all these feedback loops in your body. And what those feedback loops are really good at is maintaining what's called in biology homeostasis.
Okay.
So your feedback loops are doing all the things needed so that you maintain your body temperature, that you maintain all the systems that allow you to stay alive.
Okay.
And that's different than the complicated systems. Like you can think of a car, something can go wrong in your car and you're on the side of the road, right? And it's not driving anymore. But when it comes to human bodies or any biology, things can go wrong, and your body will compensate and will do things to allow you to operate even when some things have gone wrong.
It won't shut down
And
automatically.
yes, and that is truly what I think separates the complex system world from the complicated system. That
Interesting.
these complex systems can operate in a very wide range of environments, including even if things can go wrong, it will compensate. And you see this, and people just don't even think about it. But if you go out on a run, there are a whole bunch of things that happen in your body. Your breathing elevates, heart rate goes up, you start sweating so that the
Yep.
extra heat gets dissipated. Like
Yep.
all of these things are happening and you're not even thinking about it. You're
Eyes
just going
dilate.
on your run.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
So
Yep.
the complex systems, what I really learned is an insight is that you can't engineer them.
Okay.
And
As
um,
in, you can't engineer the means you cannot make it. Like from scratch. Like.
well, so the real difference, and this was something I was not taught when I went to school. I wish they had explained this, but it turns out that the tools of engineering are really built on the idea that if you have this complicated system, whatever it is, you can break it into the smallest building blocks you want. And then you can study each of those building blocks in isolation, solve for each of the building blocks in isolation, then glue it all together again. That's how we design cars or buildings. That's how software is built. And it works fine. But in a complex system, you can still break them apart into building blocks. But if you try to study the building blocks in isolation, then you're studying the building blocks without the feedback loops.
Yeah, because the
And
entire ecosystem working together.
yes,
That's the
that's
beautiful
what
thing that.
makes it
Yeah.
function. And so you won't even learn about the building block if you're studying it in isolation, because it behaves differently in isolation than it does inside the complex system. So
That's deep.
what that and we run into this all the time. What people call it when things go wrong in a complex system, when you've tried to engineer it, is we call them unintended consequences. And so
Okay. I think I've heard that in when people talk about LLMs. I think, but
Well, it can happen in lots of places.
yeah,
You know, a
unintended
really,
consequences.
yeah, a really visible example is in pharmaceutical R&D and drug development.
Mm,
You know, you study these drug actions in a petri dish, for example, when you're trying to study whether the drug will do X or Y that you want it to do. But
yeah.
then you don't really learn what that drug does in people until you inject it into the people. And the more subtle problems don't show up until you inject it into a lot of people.
Yeah,
And
it's not even time. It needs just breadth of people. Yeah,
yes, yes.
yeah,
Also, physiology is diverse. So, you know, a drug that, you know, you can take and get the positive effect might not work for me or vice versa. So there's the diversity of physiology too. But even the over-the-counter drugs, you know, aspirin turns out to have issues with people's stomachs.
yeah,
Tylenol,
yeah.
yep, and
The gut
Tylenol and
biome.
Advil have liver and kidney damage that is cumulative.
Yeah, and
So,
Aleve
you
is
know,
really bad too.
yes, and those are just the over-the-counter things.
Yeah,
Um, so all of these, the problem with the way we try to study and solve for these biological systems and other complex systems is that because we don't study it holistically, we don't study it with the feedback loops. And that means that we don't learn what really happens in the whole body that we
mm,
really need to understand to really solve for these problems. So that's really where that was one of the big insights. So the way that manifests in food
yeah,
is that um, I don't believe you can engineer food again because we don't really know what we're doing and we don't
yeah,
have visibility to the side effects, the
yeah.
unintended consequences. So the food investments we make at 1cc, we look for entrepreneurs that are developing innovations that are grounded in natural systems and aligned with old food cultures.
Hmm.
Because it turns out that even though 500, 1,000 years ago, people didn't know about molecular biology, they didn't know about gut biota or any of these other things, what they did have was a lot of time. And so they tried everything. I don't think they were geniuses. I think they tried
Yeah.
every possible thing to do with food. And, and they learned things that were nourishing people's bodies and things that were not working out, they dropped.
Hmm.
And the only disservice they did to us was they didn't write us a memo. Dear future generations,
How to build
here are
this?
the
Yeah,
9 million experiments we tried that didn't work. You know,
yeah.
those failures
The
are lost
notes.
in the mists of time. The notes are gone. But in
Yeah.
every corner of the world, I don't care where you go, you look at any old food culture and it's remarkably healthy for us. And unfortunately, the last 75 years in America, our food system is literally killing us. So that's why we like old food cultures.
Gotcha. And just explain a little bit to me. They're killing us. To me, it means that they're not necessarily interested in our health and lasting long as a customer, just in
Yep.
making us pay for something really fast. That's what it sounds like to me at a high level.
Yeah, so their focus is profit. So what they're focused on is not just maintaining the profitability of their big companies. They're actually always looking every quarter to grow their profits. So that's a real challenge
Hmm.
in the food world, not just in food, in other places too, because once you're so big that there are no new customers to get, or literally the new customers that are being added uh, is just balancing out for the customers that are aging out and
Hmm.
disappearing. And so to grow your profits from there, what you typically do as a big company is you look at your ingredients and your inputs and you figure out how to reduce the expenses, the cost of your ingredients. And that typically means you're also going to reduce the quality of those ingredients. And those changes are going to be very subtle quarter to quarter
Hmm.
because you don't need that much of a drop in your expenses to meet your quarterly profit growth. So
Mm,
they can be almost imperceptible quarter to quarter, but then you stack the quarters into years and years into decades,
yeah,
and you get
exactly.
GM cars, Hershey's chocolate, Budweiser beer, McDonald's burgers, and more recently, Boeing airplanes. They can't even make a plane that flies anymore because they've
Oh
decided
yeah,
that, the what they used to really care about was engineering and having a margin so planes
yeah,
would, not fall out of the sky.
yeah.
And they
They need
decided that,
performance out of the spreadsheet.
right, they decided profit was more important.
Yeah.
But so what we see with there's something that I think is pretty broadly agreed upon, that the more processed a food is, the worse it is for you.
Is like the thing is, people making healthy food is not a new thing, and people try to um, thread that needle, right? With uh, we mentioned this in our onboard core. We people try to do this with impossible meat or impossible burgers, but
Yep.
that's they're not hitting the mark, right? Do you want to
Right.
explain that? Because like, it
Yeah.
seems that they're trying to solve it. It seems like it, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so the motivation, I think, is a great motivation. That is that the American animal agriculture system is really horrifying. It's horrendous. How we raise beef and other animals, chickens, I mean, you name it,
Mm,
is just horrifying. And I think that's what motivates a lot of people to see what they can do to fix that.
yeah.
I'd also say that in America, we eat too much meat, which is also not good. So my solution to that is, vegetables are great, and there are lots of good recipes for vegetables.
Hmm.
So, that's not the problem. Unfortunately, the people like Impossible and Beyond Meat decided that they needed to make a vegetable taste like a cow. And when you go down that road, you're really engineering the food, and that's what I was talking about
Uh,
before. Those products are ultra processed,
hmm.
and since we already know that the more processed the food is, the worse it is, um, that's not really a good idea to go down that road.
Hmm.
So I am aligned with the motivations of the people that are operating that in that industry. But unfortunately, engineering food is not the answer for the reasons I was talking about before. Like, we don't really understand the biological systems, our bodies, or how food and our gut biota, which is another piece that we don't understand very well either.
Yeah.
That, it's not just a complex system, it's actually layers of complex systems on top of each other.
Mm.
And the result of that, unfortunately, is you can't engineer the food. And that's why, alt protein, we don't believe makes a lot of sense, because that's, engineering it. It's not gonna end well. Now cellular agriculture is a really big deal. People want to grow meat cells in a fermentation tank. I believe that's going to end just as badly as alt protein has.
Oh man.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's going to take billions of dollars of capital in many years, because for some reason, people think it's worth a try. But again, I have this contrarian view that, you shouldn't try to engineer these things when
Hmm.
you don't understand what you're doing. And that's why I like these old food cultures, because they've just been around long enough that it's proven by time. And we end up doing all these experiments. I grew up in a time when I was a kid. Everyone said, "Oh, butter is going to kill you. Don't eat butter." Everyone should eat margarine. We invented trans fats a few decades before in a lab, and margarine's going to solve all our cardiac issues.
Yeah.
And that took 50 years. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, trans fats kill people. Maybe we should ban them from the food supply.
Yeah.
So these are mistakes we keep making, and we don't seem to be students of history to learn from those mistakes.
Yeah, it seems like in the food universe, right? It seems that the going back to the baseball analogy, the RBI of the food universe is making
Yes.
the food taste like meat,
Yes.
or like junk food, right? So that's
Yes.
you're calling it that out as the wrong metric. That's very very interesting. And I want to like give some time to the companies that you invested in, because you backed 21 companies, right, since 2019. That's quite a track record of time with them, right?
Yes.
And do you want to talk about some of these companies that really live by
Yeah.
the metric, or the myth, not myth, but the values that you have?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to do that. So half our portfolio are technology companies, actually,
Hmm.
that are solving problems in the supply chain that
Okay.
engineering can solve. And there's lots of challenges in the supply chain where engineering could help.
Okay.
But then the other half of our portfolio are food companies. And it's that half where we look for things that are grounded in natural systems and aligned with old food cultures.
Hmm.
And an example, the first check we wrote was in an infant formula company called Bobbie. And the founder grew up in Ireland, and so she was raised there. She was an early team member at Airbnb. So she was living in San
Hmm.
Francisco and had a child and was trying to find some infant formula. Went to the store, made the mistake of looking at the back of the can
Hmm.
at the ingredients. And, it turns out America, it is regulated by the FDA, but you're allowed to put anything into the infant formula that is legal in the rest of the food system. So high fructose corn syrup, ultra processed
Oh
ingredients, like the
yeah.
whole chemistry kit is essentially available. And she knew, having grown up in Ireland, that it is regulated in Europe, but they don't allow any of this stuff into their infant formula. And consequently, it's health.
Hmm.
So their idea for their business was, let's create a clean label organic infant formula approved and sold in the
Oh no.
well, they're doing great.
Peter, we had to time out there. For
And
some
then
reason, the
it's
internet's cutting out.
oh, can you hear me?
Sorry, Peter. Yeah, sorry,
Oh,
Peter. Like, yeah,
that's not
it seems a little bit choppy on your end, or it could be my internet, mine too. We just need to give it a bit of time.
can you hear me now?
Uh,
I
no,
guess
no, sir.
you can't hear
Oh
me
now
now, or you can.
I can hear you
Oh
now.
no.
You're Yeah, no. I can hear you now. Your voice is clear, but the picture is a little bit like depixelated. Oh no. Hold on. Let me see
Oh
if we can.
no.
Yeah. Oh man. But Peter, this has been like a really really fascinating and
Try
insightful
switching to
conversation.
network.
Okay, hold on. I'll wait for you.
I dropping out,
Internet
or can you
troubles.
hear me now?
I can hear your voice. Is it in real
Um,
time? I don't
should I
know.
try switch? I
Yeah, I'll be here. I'll be here.
see if I can networks, if that helps.
Yeah, no worries. I'll be here. I'm gonna check the network on my side too. Yeah, 580 on my side.
All right, let's see if this works. I've switched to a different network. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. You're
All right.
coming better in resolution.
Yeah,
Whoa.
so
Yeah, nice. It works now.
is that better? All right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so in addition to Bobbie, another good example is Goodles, which is
Goodles, okay.
remaking mac and cheese. So, unfortunately, most of the mac and cheese that's in the marketplace is, not that healthy.
Hmm.
And the Kraft is the main player, and they are not delivering the kinds of quality products that a lot of consumers really want. And
Hmm.
that is one of the things that keeps me optimistic about the work we do,
Hmm.
that younger generations are much more interested in the quality of their food, where it's coming from, and how it's made,
Hmm.
much more than my generation has. So, Goodles is doing high protein, high fiber, great tasting mac and cheese, and they're just killing it now.
Hmm.
And so we see, again, it's doing these things that are, not trying to engineer something new,
Yeah.
but
Use
are
ingredients
really,
that are already there.
yes, going back to the things that we knew were good for us. And you know, one of the things that I like to do, having this contrarian perspective, you just have to take a step back and look at the American healthcare system, where we spend twice as much per capita than any other country on earth.
Hmm.
And our health outcomes rank 30th or 40th, depending on which outcome measure you look at. And um, there's debate about what proportion of that healthcare spend is devoted to the metabolic diseases caused by our diets, but it's significant. Depends who you talk to. Generally, it's viewed as over half, and some estimates are even at the 70, 80% level,
Yeah.
which means, we're spending all this money because we're making people sick, and other countries have not done that.
You make me think like, why is this not a national level kind of priority? Because I know, chatting with a VC who's focusing on quantum computers, or quantum industries, that the whole nation is geared on, is investing in companies alongside VCs to make sure that all the quantum development and production takes place here in the United States. I'm wondering, is it a thing with food, and because it seems like a national security thing too, to make people healthy.
It should be, and other countries are treating food as a national security issue. Um, Unfortunately, and I don't know that I can say why, but the U.S. government, I would say broadly, has been captured by the industries that it
Hmm.
used to regulate. And I think that's part of the problem that we live with today, where in Europe, the regulators are much more aggressive. I have a theory that because European governments have nationalized health programs, they
Hmm.
are on the financial hook for their citizens' health. So
Oh, okay.
I think they have a strong incentive to actually make sure the food is healthy, because if the food's not healthy,
They're
that's going
paying
to
for it.
cost them. Yes,
Ah.
they're paying for it. Whereas, in America, this is all GDP positive. The more people we sicken, the higher GDP is, the more profitable healthcare is, the better, the businesses do. That isn't really, good for citizens. But we don't really seem to be organized to optimize for citizens anymore. So that just seems to be how the structure is built today.
No, but like, I'm glad that you're being the contrarian out there, and then signaling that this is a thing, or an industry that we could like, really shine a light on, and focus on. And your talk about complex and complicated, that's been really insightful. And I'm like, I want to like see if I can apply that to how we're building things at the startup that I'm building. So yeah, I want to keep maintain time here. But Peter, I just want to say this has been a wonderful conversation. I had a lot of fun chatting with you. and learning
Yeah,
from you.
likewise.
Yeah, and I really hope to like have you over in the future, and even like host some of your companies as well. So yeah, before we go, how can folks reach out to you if they're in the same realm and they really jive with you and want to talk food and technology with you?
Sure. We're at 1cc.vc. That's our website. And we provide a lot of our tools online. So a lot of what we think about and how we do our work, we're
Mm.
happy to share with folks. So people can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And we have, and maybe you can put this in the notes, there's a guest lecture. I do guest lectures at colleges, and
Ooh,
there's
okay.
one that I recorded from Stanford that people are welcome to watch to dig in a little further into how we do our work.
Do you have those lectures on YouTube?
It's actually not on YouTube. It's hosted on a video site called Wistia, but
Oh, okay.
it's available, and I can send it to you separately, but there's a link that you can check out, and it's on
Yeah,
LinkedIn too.
I'm happy to like share that to my audience here. So yeah, like this has been really insightful, and thank you for your insights into this, and what it means to be a contrarian in this space. So we're gonna end the stream here, ladies and gentlemen. You had Peter Herz here from First Course Capital. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Edward. It was a pleasure.